notice also the most movement that we get in any brass part is in these horns, the Divisi horns. And it's right at that moment of arrival at the A5. So that's adding to that sense of gravitas. So this is a very subtle move with an interior part, but it feels really huge and dramatic. Hey everybody, it's Noah with Producer Hive, and I have something just a little bit different for you today. I was challenged to recreate from scratch a piece of music from the NieR Automata original soundtrack. So the idea was I was to listen to it very carefully, plot out what I heard using my MIDI keyboard, and then go digging through my instrument libraries to try to recreate the sounds from the recording as best as I could. The aim of this new series is to showcase a track, break down the compositional arrangement and production techniques used to create the track, and in doing so, hopefully shed some light on how you can use these very same techniques and ways of thinking about music and apply them in your own creations. For the music producers in the audience, be sure to check the link in the description for free downloads of all of the stems that I assembled for this project. They're basically the keys to the city for anybody who wants to practice mixing this large, complex piece, or for anybody who wants to use the material as a jumping off point for a remix or something of that nature. And be sure to send us whatever you come up with. We love to hear your creations. My goal in taking on this challenge was to learn some of the techniques that composer Keiichi Okabe uses to such great effect in making this piece work so well. I wanted to know how a piece of somewhat melancholy music with really prominent strings and vocal parts nonetheless has the drive and forward momentum necessary to underscore a really intense boss battle. I wanted to know how the story behind the music informs the compositional style. And of course, I wanted to find the ear candy, the sort of musical Easter eggs that are scattered throughout the music. So for the answers to these questions and more, be sure to stay tuned. But for now, let's have a listen to my made from scratch recreation of a beautiful song. Beautiful. There's just so much stuff going on in this piece that even after all the time it took to recreate it, every time I listen, there's something that stirs in me. There's something to hear, to turn your attention to. And that's, you know, it's because there's so much going on, and it becomes even more apparent when you open up the hood and see what's going on inside. So that's what we're going to do now. But the first question that I want to consider is, how is this melancholy music with violins and voice at the forefront working so well in a boss battle, which is meant to be underscored by really intense music? And to answer that question, Okabe is quoted in a 2016 interview with DualShockers as saying, "In most games, when you compose the tracks, you compose them for a place or a moment or a scene, but for NieR, I composed for each character and their emotions in any given moment. A character may feel sad during a battle, and usually a battle sequence would have fierce music, but for NieR, if the character feels sad, I made sure to have that kind of feeling in that fierceness." This approach of joining together these two seemingly contradictory affects comes through most clearly, I think, in the juxtaposition of the drum parts with the vocal melody and violin strings counter melodies. And so you have these two totally different affects if you hear them alone, but when they come together, you get a sort of hybrid vibe, and it is seamless. Here's what I mean. If we solo out the drums, if I can find, there we go. If we solo out the drums and listen to them with fresh ears, not thinking of the rest of the piece at all. And then we do that same thing with the strings and the vocals. So we'll grab the strings, grab the vocals. It's like they come from two completely different sound worlds, and that effect is even more prominent if we, or that difference I should say, is really even more prominent when we, what do we need to get rid of here? I think the second violins. Yeah, we'll get rid of the second violin spiccato just for a moment so that you can hear just the melancholy. And of course, we're getting attacked with the artifact in the vocal track there. The one thing that's not completely made from scratch is this vocal track, which is from the original, and there's a sort of phasing technique used to get rid of all of the other instruments there. But then you can hear the artifact when it's just the vocals, or just the vocals and like one or two other things. It goes away when we have everything all together. But at any rate, when you put them together, and we'll bring everybody back now, when you put all of these parts together, they sound like they were always meant to be together. And they are. It's just when you hear them apart, you realize that they are from two very different sound worlds. So when they come together, they create this very nice, complex sound. But what it is that hybridization of these two different affects that don't seem at first to belong together. The drum parts in particular create this driving forward momentum by anticipating the beat in a way that sort of keeps you guessing, even though it is a fairly repetitive ostinato. And here's what I mean by that. Notice how we sort of oscillate between being on the beat and being off the beat in the first part of the measure. And then that pattern continues until at some point the offbeat is just conspicuously absent. And then that puts you back on your toes because you're sort of unsure whether that offbeat is coming back. And the structure is such that this pattern can repeat, but it always feels a little bit new when that offbeat is missing. Let's have a listen to it. So you've got on beat, off beat, on beat, off beat, on beat, off beat, on beat. Where's the offbeat? That pattern is it keeps things fresh, keeps things moving. If you want to settle into something, keep everything on the on beat. If you want to always feel like you're sort of falling forward in a piece of music, use that offbeat, especially with these heavy taiko drums in the snares that we have going on up here. Another element that I think is really important in the drums themselves is this sense of dynamics that you get by being careful about how you play in the velocities, and that corresponds in real life to just the variation in dynamics and how players play. And you know, if you take a look at the taiko drum part, these velocities aren't they're not varying wildly, right? Somewhere between 95 and 127 is not a whole lot of change, but that subtle difference is part of what gives you that forward momentum, that feeling like you're always just maybe about to fall forward. And we can see the same thing in this marching band section here. With the, you know, it's particularly this snare drum. This little roll into the section is very clear in that. This is not just marking time. This is telling a story. It's an instrument with a really good capacity for, a really strong capacity for telling a story through dynamic contrast. So that's one aspect of the instrumentation. Another aspect that sort of goes hand in hand with the drum part in creating this sort of martial undertone to hybridize with the strings and the vocal parts is the brass, the use of brass. Now, strings and vocals, those are really the centerpiece of this piece of music. Those are the parts that are moving. Those are the parts that are the primary melodies and counter melodies that we're sort of attuned to listen to. But the brass does a really nice job of not only creating that martial undertone, because you hear brass and you hear drums and you think marching army. That's just sort of and that's a cultural connotation that we get used to. The more film music and game music you listen to, that's sort of what's driven home, is that's what those code for, that's what they mean. But they also, in this piece, serve a role of creating this chordal structure over which the more primary melodic instruments are moving. So you have these chordal structures that sort of set the tone, and then you can have all these moving parts above it, and it doesn't sound scattered. It sounds a little bit more focused and connected. And the way that Okabe does this is with some really nice voice leading in these different brass parts. So let's have a listen to them by themselves. Now I want to draw your attention back to what happens around 18 to 21, this area. So our trumpet comes in a little bit late. So we've got our trombone and our tuba, or I should say our trombones, or no, sorry, they're horns, my bad. So we've got our horns. It's a divisi part, so we've got two different horns going at different times. And then we've got our tuba undergirding everything. So the tuba is our structure. That's that growling foundation at the bottom. And then our trumpet comes in a little bit late, and it's a real point of arrival where we start to hear it. And I'll remind you of where that is right now. And then it's out again. But then the next time it comes in is this other really major point of arrival, and the trumpet is climbing up to its apex, to its highest note. And we hear that note 3 times. The first time we hear it, we have this low D in the tuba part. And so we've got this massive range between our lowest brass and our highest brass instrument. They've sort of, the contour, they've moved apart from each other. And so it sounds like this. And then we've got another climb up to that A. We're going right back up to the A. But listen to what happens the second time that A is reached by the trumpet part. So the tuba part has moved up to, it's marked as an A sharp here. It's really a B flat in this key. So that's we've climbed up a minor sixth in the tuba part, which in this tuba part, which isn't moving a whole lot, that's a pretty big leap. And you can feel that space, that distance. It has bridged the gap a little bit. And so when you hear that trumpet part, it's the same note. It's that same A5, but it feels like it has a whole new gravitas because of that tuba part moving up. So this is the exciting thing about good voice leading, right? That A5 is a sort of static entity, but in moving up against that A5, we've created a new space, or Okabe has created a new space between the notes, and it has a different kind of feeling to it. Now the interval is across several octaves, 5 octaves, or 4.5, whatever, between D0 and A5, right? So long distance, but that's a fifth. If you break down the several octaves in between. But then when we get to this point, that B flat against the A, where is it? There we go. That B flat against an A, that's a minor second, or in this case, it would be, depending on how you do the octaves, it would be a major seventh. That is not a consonant interval, and you don't notice it because there's so much space. But if these were right next to each other, like if I were to just plot out an A and a B flat, yeah, that's a really close harmony. And of course you have all these octaves between, so you don't notice that there's that the vibrations are rubbing up against each other, and that's how we get this sense of needing to resolve. And we do. The trumpet hops down to that D5 before moving back up to the A5. So let's listen to this whole section again, the 3 arrivals of that high A in the trumpet, and see how they're different each time. So that third time in the tuba, we're down to an A. And so that's depending on how you think of it, it's either an octave or a unison when you don't have these octaves displacing it from the high A. So that's the resolution we're looking for. We have this feeling of calm at the end of this section before moving into a new section. But notice also the most movement that we get in any brass part is in these horns, the Divisi horns. And it's right at that moment of arrival at the A5. So that's adding to that sense of gravitas. So this is a very subtle move with an interior part, but it feels really huge and dramatic. So let's put it back in context for just a minute, and then we will move on to our next thing that we're looking at. So that even the voice is getting involved too. We've got a little suspension on the voice too, where they're hanging out on B flat and then resolve down by a half step to the A. So everybody's coming back to A, and it's like the trumpets see this coming. It's sort of like they're climbing up to the A. They're like, "Come on, everybody!" First time, nobody's quite sure what's going on. The tuba's down at that D, and then the second time, everybody's really unclear what they're supposed to do. They're all sitting at that B flat, including the tuba, and then the third time is the charm, and the last holdouts are the voice part, but they resolve down to that B flat. So really good storytelling in the music by Okabe, and really good voice leading, really good chord structures. Now the brass parts are not the only parts where we get this little bit of close harmony tension prior to a resolution. The voice and the way that the voice interacts with the other instruments creates all these little opportunities to make a little bit of crunchiness as pitches move against each other, sort of getting close and then either moving into a unison or moving back apart into a wider harmony that is a little bit more stable. So these unstable harmonies, this instability that they create, is where we get this sense of tension that happens here and there at really key critical moments in the piece. And I think that ties in with the story in a really obvious way, in that this character who we're battling at this point in the boss battle, the character on whom this piece is based on Okabe's discussion of how he's planning out his music. That constant pursuit of an inability to reach something, that's where that tension comes in. I think that it's like a constant cycle of getting your hopes up and feeling disappointed, that especially those of us involved in music are probably very familiar with. That is what is defining what's happening in the voice part as it relates with the other instruments that are supporting it. So one section where I think that's really clear that we'll take a look at is this lead into the breakdown section. So I'll play it so that we're on the same page about what I'm talking about here. Maybe I will. okay, so we've got this building tension and there's a moment where the tension is at its highest, and then everything sort of falls out into that breakdown. The way that Okabe makes that happen is through a little bit of some close harmonies. So let's take a look at what we have in this first violin part here that's very prominent. We've got a G. What follows the G? Yeah, G, A, B flat, C, D, D sharp, or E flat, depending on how you're thinking of the B and E flat. So we've got so it's just a scale, just moving up. And then in comparison, in the tuba part, we've got a little descending scale, which is good voice leading, of course. So let me drop down the octave a little bit here. And then in the voice part, I might have to listen to it again just to get it right. Yeah, let's hear this. Okay, so we've got an A sitting as the highest note in that voice part. Recall we have a D moving into an E flat in the violin part. That is a diminished fifth, if we're thinking of it as an E flat, which we are. So we've got a diminished fifth there. That is the most unstable harmony that you can come up with. That diminished fifth wants so badly to resolve to a fifth, which is one of these perfect intervals. When I say it's the most unstable, it could be that the minor second is the most unstable. At any rate, it is who's competing here. It's all music is the mission, not a competition. I'm pretty sure whatever it is, it's very unstable, right? And then to add a little bit more tension there, look at the horn divisi part. And I think both horns at this point are playing a C. Yeah, so we've got two horn parts that are climbing up into a C, and we add that to our voice part, and then our violin part, which is going from D to E flat. That is a diminished triad, which if you're looking for something that feels like it needs to resolve, like this is the most tense we can get before exploding, that's the triad we're talking about here. So let's hear this one more time. So that has to resolve. It feels like we're at our most tense, and so that's where we get our breakdown section. I would not call that breakdown section a full resolution, though, and that's important because this piece of music is structured for a boss battle. I suppose now might be a good moment to share some of the backstory of this piece within the context of the game and how that informs the performing forces and harmonies that we're hearing. The character that you're battling at this point in the game is a synthetic life form that has grown obsessed with her own beauty and starts pursuing these physical enhancements that will make her even more beautiful to her unrequited love interest. She learns how to sing operatically, which might explain Okabe's choice to use these two vocal parts in the main sections of the music, as well as the choral sections in the intro and the transitions. The pursuit of beauty, of this like Platonian ideal that is ultimately unattainable, comes through in these close harmonies that I mentioned earlier. Holding close harmonies and delaying their resolution really does something to us as listeners. In terms of form, this piece is written for a boss battle, which is something of a tricky proposition for a composer, because each player is going to take a different amount of time in order to defeat a boss. The energy has to remain fairly consistent throughout, as you don't want a lull, like right as a player delivers the fatal blow. You also have to write on a loop, because somebody might take a really long time and then need a few repetitions of the piece, whereas another player might not even take the full iteration of the full piece. So that's where these transitional sections really come in handy and serve as a connective tissue before the main sections come in. So here's an example of one of these transitional sections. So that's really where the transitional sections come in handy. You've got this sort of connective tissue between your A section and your B section, so that the changeover from A to B is not so abrupt. And the changeover from B to A also is not very abrupt. So with all of these mechanisms in place, you can probably hear the A section and the B section repeat 3 or 4 times before you even realize that it's repetitive music. This is not a lot of music. Between the A and the B sections and the transitional material, it's what I think it's about 2 minutes. So that 2-minute loop can be played over and over again until, you know, you're 8 minutes into your boss battle, and then you might start to realize that you're hearing the same thing over and over again. Now, of course, if you're analyzing the music compositionally, it jumps out at you fairly quickly that you're listening to something different. But as a player who's really focused on the task at hand and not so much on the music, the repetitive nature of it isn't going to catch you right away. And it's because of that transitional material. Now, these are fairly transparent, straightforward tricks that you can have up your sleeve as a game score composer, and as any other composer, because, you know, music so rarely is experienced by itself. Probably there is something else going on. You can keep that in mind as you write and as you think about what can be repeated and what maybe shouldn't be repeated. And regardless of how straightforward these tricks are, they're super effective. There are a lot of really lovely things happening in this piece, and we talked about a few of them. But one layer I didn't catch until I started listening a little more carefully so that I could reconstruct the piece is this little woodwind part here. It's really just a little Easter egg. It isn't essential to the music. It doesn't come through all that strongly in the recording, but when you catch it, it'll put a smile on your face. And that's something I particularly appreciate about Okabe's work, is that he's writing for a broad audience, for a lot of people to consume and enjoy. And, you know, he's writing as part of a video game. So depending on who you are as a gamer, as someone who's playing, you might not pay attention to the music. You might play with the sound off on your monitor or your television. So it's not guaranteed that people are going to listen and appreciate this music for what it is. But that doesn't stop him from writing really enjoyable, beautiful stuff that you're gonna pick up on and say like, oh, wow, I didn't catch that. That's cool. So here's what I'm talking about. I'll play through it. It's just this delicate little piccolo part that I didn't catch the first time, but is really nice. Let's listen to it in context. So that's part of why every time I listen to this piece, there's a little something else to latch onto and to think about, which is really nice as a composer. I suppose that's as good a place as any to stop for now. Do remember that that link in the description is there for you with free downloads of all of the stems from this project. Please do enjoy those. And now, here's where I ask you for some comments. Be sure to shout it out if you picked up on any compositional techniques in this piece that I might have missed. It would be really good to have all of these in one place in the comments section so that we can have another listen to a beautiful song with a fresh perspective. Please also send us suggestions for other pieces of music that you might like to hear broken down in this same format. Like I mentioned in the beginning, this is going to become something of a series, so if you suggest something, there's a pretty good chance that you might see it in a future episode. If you have enjoyed this video, if you found it entertaining, if you learned something from it, be sure to subscribe to the Producer Hive YouTube channel and hit the notification bell so that you can stay on top of it anytime we put new stuff out there. Also check out producerhive.com, which is just a treasure trove of articles and reviews and other resources of an audio or music production related nature. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you next time.